A timekeeper at a factory is responsible for blowing the whistle at noon for the lunch break. Every day, she checks her watch and blows the whistle right when it strikes 12 p.m. One day, she bumps her watch against something and worries that it might be off. Wanting to be sure, she decides to have a professional clockmaker adjust her watch. She visits the clockmaker's shop and explains her job, emphasizing the importance of her watch being perfectly accurate. The clockmaker reassures her, saying that there's no need to worry, as he sets his watch by the clocks in the back of his shop. He's sure they're always on time because he personally adjusts them every Sunday when the church bells ring at 6 a.m. Feeling satisfied, the woman leaves the shop. But as she walks away, a thought crosses her mind. How does the church know exactly when it's 6 a.m.? Curious, she heads to the church and asks the bell ringer how he knows when to ring the bells and how he keeps track of time. The bell ringer smiles and says, "Oh, I just ring the bells when my watch strikes 6 a.m. I'm certain it's accurate. I check it every day at noon when the factory blows its whistle for lunch." Two little boys, one 9 years old and the other 4, walk into a grocery store. The 9-year-old grabs a box of tampons from the shelf and carries it up to the register. The cashier looks at the box and asks, "Oh, these must be for your mom, right?" The 9-year-old shakes his head. "Nope, not for my mom." The cashier, now a bit curious, asks, "Well, they must be for your sister then?" Again, the boy replies, "Nope, not for my sister either." The cashier, now even more curious, asks, "Well, who are they for then?" The 9-year-old calmly answers, "They're for my 4-year-old little brother." Surprised, the cashier exclaims, "Your little brother? Why on earth would you get them for him?" The 9-year-old explains, "Well, on TV they say if you wear one of these, you can do a lot of things like swim, run really fast, or ride a bike, and my little brother can't do any of those things." Two college students accidentally miss their math final exam. The next day, they go to plead with their professor, and feeling generous that day, he agrees to let them retake it. He tells them to come back the next day for an oral exam. When they return, the professor tells one of them to wait outside while he tests the other. The student waits and listens through the door. The professor starts the exam with the first student. "You're riding in a train car, and it gets too hot. What do? The student responds, "I open the window." The professor follows up, "All right, now this window is 2 feet wide and 3 feet high. The train is traveling at 50 miles per hour going north, and the wind is blowing at 15 miles per hour to the east. How long will it take for the new air to replace the old air in the car?" The student looks confused and replies, "I don't know." The professor gives him an F, dismisses him, and calls in the second student. He begins the same question. "You're riding in a train car, and it gets too hot. What do?" The student answers, "I take my jacket off." The professor presses on, "Okay, but it's still too hot. What do?" The student says, "I take my shirt off." The professor asks, "I understand, but it's very, very hot now." The student replies, "I'll just get naked." The professor, nodding, says, "Okay, but there are other people in the car who will see you get naked." With all seriousness, the student responds, "With all due respect, Professor, I don't care if my grandmother and my priest are there. There's no way I'm opening that darn window." On the last day of kindergarten, all the children brought presents for their teacher. The florist's son handed her a gift. She shook it, held it up, and said, "I bet I know what it is. Some flowers." "That's right," shouted the little boy. Then the candy store owner's daughter handed the teacher a gift. She held it up, shook it, and said, "I bet I know what this is. A box of candy." "That's right," shouted the little girl. The next gift came from the liquor store owner's son, little Johnny. The teacher held it up and noticed that it was leaking. She touched a drop with her finger and tasted it. "Is it wine?" she asked. "No," said little Johnny. The teacher tasted another drop. "Is it juice?" she asked. "No," he answered. Finally, the teacher said, "I give up. What is it?" "A puppy," little Johnny replied. A blonde gets a job as a physical education teacher for 14-year-olds. On her first day, she watches the kids playing soccer. She notices one boy standing alone at the far end of the field while all the others are running around having fun. Feeling sorry for him, she approaches and says, "Are you okay?" "Yes," he replies. "You know, you can go and play with the other kids," she encourages. "It's best if I stay here," he says. "Why's that, sweetie?" she asks, concerned. The boy looks at her like she's missed something and says, "Because I'm the goalie." A blonde woman had a little accident and went to the hospital for a checkup. As she arrived, a male doctor approached her and said, "Could you please lower your pants?" The blonde woman smirked and replied, "I'll lower them, but only on one condition." The doctor, taken aback, asked, "What do you mean, one condition?" With a grin, the blonde responded, "If I lower them, then I won't be paying for the treatment." A little girl wants to take her dog, Lulu, for a walk, so she asks her mother if she can take her around the block. Her mother says, "No, sweetie. Lulu is in heat." "What does that mean?" the girl asks. "Why don't you ask your dad in the garage?" her mother suggests. The girl heads to the garage and asks her dad, "I want to take Lulu for a walk, but Mom says she's in heat and told me to ask you about it." The father, thinking quickly, grabs a rag, pours some petrol on it, and rubs Lulu's backside to disguise the scent. "Now you can take her for a walk," he says. "Just don't let her off the leash and she'll be fine." The little girl skips away, and a few minutes later, she returns with an empty leash and no Lulu. Concerned, her dad asks, "Where's Lulu, sweetie?" The girl replies, "She ran out of gas halfway around the block, so the neighbor's dog is giving her a push home." A stockbroker walks past a kid selling lemonade. "Hey, mister, want some lemonade?" the little girl calls to him. The stockbroker, getting out of his brand new BMW in a nice tailored suit, is about to walk past when he does a double take at the sign that says lemonade $50. "Your sign is wrong, kid," he says. "I think you mean 50 cents. The little girl shakes her head. "Nope, $50, mister. I need the money for space camp." The stockbroker pauses, appreciating the hustle, but clearly thinking the kid is going about it the wrong way. "Look, sweetie, I know you're trying to make money, but you have to charge what people are willing to pay. No one is going to pay that much for a tiny cup of lemonade. Now, what do you think is a fair price?" The little girl beams and says, $50, mister." The stockbroker sighs and shakes his head. "Okay, I'm going to pass. You see, you can't make a profit when no one will pay your price. Now, do you have anything else for sale?" "Homemade brownies, 50 cents. The stockbroker winces in frustration. "Okay, look, I studied economics at Harvard and got my MBA from Wharton, so let me teach you a little about business. Each of your little cups of lemonade probably costs you about 50 cents, including the cost of your stand." He pulls out $1. "I'll pay you 10 times that much because I want to help you understand markup." The little girl shakes her head and smiles. "No thanks, mister. $50, please." The stockbroker sighs. "You know what? I give up. Take this $1 and I'll buy 2 of your brownies. I know you're losing money on them, but I'm not going to buy a single cup of your overpriced lemonade. I'm trying to teach you about business, but I guess this is the only way for you to learn a lesson." "Okay," the girl says, taking the $1 and putting 10 brownies on a plate. To make his point, the stockbroker eats one of the brownies right in front of her. Suddenly, he starts coughing and gagging uncontrollably. "Oh my God, what did you put in these?" She grins happily. "It's my special recipe. Eggs, flour, butter, cocoa, sawdust, and goat pellets. This is horrible. I have to get this taste out of my mouth," he says, desperate. The little girl pulls out a jar full of $50 bills, cocks her head to the side, and beams. "You'll want some lemonade." A biology student working on his thesis about wasps is walking down the street when he spots a record in the window of a record store titled "Wasps of the World and the Sounds They Make." Intrigued, he walks into the store and says to the shopkeeper, "I'll take that wasp record in the window, please. I've been studying so many wasps that I'll probably be able to identify each one just by their sound." The shopkeeper smiles, feigning interest, and the student makes his purchase. When he gets home, he eagerly puts the record on. The first track plays bzzz, but the student is stumped. He can't identify which type of wasp it is. He waits for the next track. Bzzz. Again, no luck. He still can't tell the species. By the time he reaches the fifth track, he's in despair. Not a single wasp has been identified, even though he thought he was an expert. Frustrated, he calls his professor to come over for help. When the professor arrives, the student explains, nearly in tears, "I thought I was an expert, but I can't identify a single wasp on this entire record." The professor ponders for a moment, then looks at the record. "Ah, I know what the problem is," he says. What is it?" the student asks, desperate. The professor smiles and says, "You've got it on the B-side." The teacher asked the class to use the word fascinate in a sentence. Molly raised her hand and said, "My family went to my granddad's farm and we all saw his pet sheep. It was fascinating." The teacher smiled and replied, "That's good, Molly, but I wanted you to use the word fascinate, not fascinating." Caroline raised her hand next. She said, "My family went to see New York City and I was fascinated." The teacher nodded. "Well, that's good, Caroline, but I wanted you to use the word fascinate." Little Johnny raised his hand. The teacher, knowing Johnny's mischievous nature but desperate to move on, sighed and said, "Go ahead, Johnny." Johnny grinned and said, "My Aunt Carolyn has a sweater with 10 buttons, but her breasts are so big she can only fasten 8. The teacher slumped into her chair, utterly defeated.